Imposter syndrome might not exist, it was never supposed to be called a syndrome, and it only really took off in popularity from the mid-2000s onwards. These are three of the surprising truths I learned from this article in the New Yorker, and in this video I'll be sharing the extraordinary origin story of the label imposter syndrome, thinking about how we might fix some imposter feelings. What you learn in this video might transform how you feel about yourself. I'm Raj, careers coach at Cambridge University. Let's do this. In 1972 at Oberlin College in Ohio, Pauline Clance worked as an assistant professor. She often heard female students confessing experiences where they were convinced that they'd been admitted to college because there'd been an error on their test scores or that they'd fooled authority figures into thinking they were smarter than they actually were. Now, these feelings were familiar to Clance, often downplaying her own achievements and attributing them to luck rather than her own ability, even when earning a PhD. Leslie Jameson goes on to explain, one evening that's Pauline Clance and her colleague Susan Imes, threw a party for some of the Oberlin students, complete with strobe lights and dancing, but the students looked disappointed and said, "We thought we were going to be learning something." They were hyper-vigilant, so intent on staving off the possibility of failure that they couldn't let loose for even a night. I know that feeling. So Clance and Imes turned the party into a class, setting up a circle of chairs and encouraging students to talk. After some of them confessed that they felt like imposters among their brilliant classmates, Clance and Imes started referring to the feelings they were observing as the imposter phenomenon. And so the term was born. And you'll notice it's the imposter phenomenon rather than imposter syndrome. And this is significant, right? Because calling something a phenomenon makes it feel more systemic, general, environmental, whereas calling something a syndrome makes it feel more personal. The story continues. The pair spent 5 years talking to more than 150 successful women, students and faculty members at several universities, professionals in fields including law, nursing and social work. Then they recorded their findings in a paper, The Imposter Phenomenon in High-Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention. It was published in 1978. It's well worth a read, and I've linked to it in the description below. It defines the imposter phenomenon as an internal experience of intellectual phoniness, living in perpetual fear that some significant person will discover that they are indeed intellectual imposters. Now let's break down each part of this. An internal experience necessarily means that we can never know that whoever we're around might be feeling imposter sensations, so we should always be kind. Second, intellectual phoniness. Now this makes sense coming out of a college setting, but I wonder if this imposter label can also be fixed to non-intellectual endeavours. I can remember being part of sports teams where I definitely felt imposter feelings. And third, some significant person will discover that they are indeed intellectual imposters. I guess this is the big fear, right? That someone in a position of power, maybe someone who knows more than us, casts us out after seeing us for who we are. I guess the dominant feeling here is one of shame. I think the imposter phenomenon can be further broken down into three parts, which might make it easier to identify potential fixes. How we perceive ourselves and our qualities, a perception of how others might be viewing us, a prediction that others' view of us will change if they get to know the real us. To better perceive ourselves and our qualities, we might spend time looking through one page at a time of the Harvard Competency Dictionary. I've linked to it below. So in this example, if we don't typically think of ourselves as being innovative, seeing it broken down like this helps us see how we might actually be innovative, challenging our perceptions of ourselves. If we stick with this over a period of time, we develop a system for seeing our quality more objectively. We might also gather the views of trusted friends, which also helps us understand how others might be viewing us, but knowing that ultimately other people's opinions of us are just that. These aren't overnight fixes, but these are some gentle things we can do to ensure we're preserving space for our full selves. Managing imposter feelings is an ongoing process for me. I feel it most acutely when I'm about to hit publish on a video, or I'm about to go in and deliver a training session. I find myself wondering what makes me think my words are the ones worth sharing. But I also know that my imposter feelings feel less sharp than they once did. I don't know whether this is because it's a natural part of getting older, or I've just gathered enough evidence to make me feel, yeah, I do belong in the places that I occupy, or I simply don't quite care quite as much what people think of me. Maybe it's a combination of all of those three things. I remember feeling imposter syndrome much more sharply when I was younger. One time sticks out in my mind. I was interviewing at Cambridge as a 17-year-old, coming up from West London, never having been anywhere posh in my life, and I remember being transfixed by the interviewing professor's leather inlaid door, something I thought only existed in James Bond films. I remember feeling, well, we're in a different place to where we come from here. And it's like that quote from Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
I wonder what imposter syndrome feels like for you. So what's up with the view that imposter syndrome might not even exist? Well, after the original research was published in 1978, it spawned a whole load of follow-up studies. By the early 1990s, the view of imposter syndrome had changed. The writer Stacey Edwards revealed that in 1993, Pauline Clance acknowledged that the set of feelings she had initially described was applicable to nearly 80% of the population. And so the argument goes, with something so universal, is it even a thing? As Stacey Edwards goes on to write, perfectly normal feelings are coded in the language of disorder as something to be healed or treated. It's conceptually shaky at best. In the Slate magazine, writer L.V. Anderson shares, we should stop calling people who experience imposter syndrome people who experience imposter syndrome and start calling people who don't experience imposter syndrome overconfident weirdos. I think this is brilliant. And so we come to the question, is the label imposter syndrome helpful or not? On the pro side, it's good to label what we feel, to legitimize and to expose feelings that might otherwise remain privately felt and privately suffered from, while the case against it is that it's too universal. We shouldn't pathologize something that's so common to so many. I've got a foot in each camp. I figure if it's useful to you, it's useful to you. The two things that surprised me most when I was doing this research. First, I had no idea of the gendered origins of the term. It doesn't surprise me at all that the label emerged from a group that didn't always equally feel welcome in spaces. And secondly, the imposter phenomenon ended up as imposter syndrome. These feel like two completely different terms. It feels like the societal causes of why we might feel this way got pushed onto the individual, in the same way that resilience training is sometimes criticised for pushing that onto the individual, rather than looking at systemic causes for why someone might need resilience training. I think the same is true for imposter syndrome. For me personally, I've resolved to be a lot more open when I'm experiencing imposter feelings if I feel like it can help someone else in my presence feel more comfortable. And second, to be a bit more direct in showing people they belong, whether through an appreciation of their work or far more fundamentally, an appreciation of their presence. We all deserve to feel welcome in the spaces we occupy. In that spirit, thank you for being here. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.